We're going to start, though, with a major story that's going on down today. This is the passage of the D.C. Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Stadium Campus Revitalization Act that, of course, went through. And to speak more about this, we're going to bring on Melinda Roth. She is a visiting associate professor of law at George Washington. Melinda, thank you so very much for taking a moment with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's just dive straight into this, and we'll speak kind of in generalities because this is a conversation that we've been talking about for months and months now, even years to some extent. What does this passage mean?
Well, as a Washingtonian and a sports law professor and a Commanders fan, I couldn't be more pleased that this passed through the Senate hearing. It's really the first step to possibly bringing the Commanders back to D.C.
And we know that that is something that a large, vast majority of the fan base has been clamoring for. And with all due respect, there have been a ton of upgrades made out there to Northwest Stadium here this year. So that stadium, not what it is that it has been considered to be in years past. However, bringing the Commanders back to Washington, D.C., this is something that means a lot to the people.
Not only does it mean a lot to the fan base and the people, but the new owner, Josh Harris, is a Washingtonian. He was born and raised here, and while he does own other sports teams, I think this purchase was special to him. He grew up rooting for the Washington team that used to be called the Redskins at that point in time. And bringing it back to Washington, I hope, is high on his list.
For not only Josh Harris, but again, many of the individuals who remember the stadium being there in Washington, D.C. at RFK. It seems like a bit of nostalgia to have this potentially be on the horizon for coming back here. When you look at it, what does it mean to all of the people of D.C. and the DMV and beyond potentially?
Well, I think we have to be cautious because it's really only the first step, and the next step will be to think about how this gets financed because the Commanders are in a very unique position in professional sports where they actually have three potential locations. It's not just DC, but clearly Maryland will try to keep them, and Virginia will try to put in an even better offer, especially after they lost the Caps and the Wizards, who are thankfully staying in DC.
You speak to that point. I mean, this is a franchise that, by all accounts, is certainly on the up and up. I mean, it had been, when you look at the product that had been out there on the field, one of the more moribund franchises in the NFL for the last 20-some-odd years. This year, a complete revitalization, not only on, again, the field in terms of the records, but just the culture that surrounds this team and the perception of the public as well. We talk about those other steps. What are the next steps to making this happen?
Well, the bill passed through the Senate committee in a 17-2, which is fantastic and shows the support, but it does have to pass the full Senate. So that would be the next step. But much more importantly, DC has to think about how they can creatively help to finance a new stadium because football stadiums are notoriously expensive. The most expensive stadium to date is SoFi in LA, which cost over $5 billion. That's B with $1 billion.
That's right.
But usually football stadiums are somewhere between $1 to $2 billion. And that means DC has to get creative in how they can finance this because they just can't borrow more to be able to pay for this. They may have to be creative in terms of some kind of a business tax, could be revenue from sports betting. There's lots of potential ideas that have been floated around, and Mayor Bowser and the DC Council will have to be creative in order to be able to match likely what Maryland and Virginia will be offering with regards to public money.
And if you're just now joining us, we are interviewing Melinda Roth talking about this major potential occurrence going down right now for Washington Commanders and Washington Commanders fans. Melinda, if you don't mind, break this down really for me in layman's terms here. So if all things do come to fruition here, and this is something that's moved forward, the likely steps will be the revitalization of the former stadium. Would that look like it being torn down and rebuilt, or just changes being made to that structure as it is? And I know that I'm asking you to kind of guesstimate on this as well.
Sure. It is very likely that RFK will sadly be torn down for a new, modern, technically advanced stadium, and not just a stadium. I mean, one of the ideas is that it would be a retail and commercial location. You know, obviously it has a huge difference in terms of geographic location over the current Northwest Stadium in Landover. It would be accessible by public transit, and of course, most importantly, it would be within the District of Columbia.
And we'll get you out of here on this. Again, many individuals are truly hoping that they would love to see the Washington Commanders return to Washington, D.C., kind of their home where it is that they were born. What are some of the factors that could prevent this from happening?
That is an excellent question, and it's ironic that I'm about to teach my sports law class, and one of the cases that the students are learning today is when the Baltimore Colts left Baltimore in the middle of the night for Indianapolis, and they did that, you know, sort of secretly. None of this is going to be happening secretly. There's going to be discussions with Josh Harris and his ownership group, with obviously DC, and, you know, potentially only with DC, but it would be financially imprudent of him not to see what Virginia or Maryland might have to offer. Things that could derail this are the full Senate may choose to, not vote the same way that the committee did today and not pass the RFK Stadium, what was known as RFK Stadium, to DC hands. That is something that could happen. Or DC may not be able to come up with the financing, with the public financing. And so it may be that there are much better, more attractive offers from either Maryland or from the state of Virginia.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, on the surface, good news for those who have had hopes of the Washington Commanders returning to Washington, D.C. However, though there was a passage, this deal is certainly not done. Thank you very much, Melinda Roth, for joining us here today on Fox 5's Live Zone.
Thank you so much for having me.